Welcome to the ZimmCast, a program dedicated to bringing you what's new in agricultural marketing. The ZimmCast is the official podcast of AgWired and hosted by Chuck and Cindy Zimmerman.
Hello and welcome to the ZimmCast. I'm Chuck Zimmerman. In this episode, the tables have been turned. We thought it would be fun for Laura McNamara, one of our very early freelancers, to interview Cindy and me about the how, what, and why we created ZimmComm and all its elements. We've had people ask about this over the years, but as you will hear from the start, it has continued to develop and pivot when needed. So listen in. Let us know. What do you think?
I'm Laura McNamara reporting from Missouri and connecting with Chuck and Cindy Zimmerman of ZimmComm. We thought it would be fun to do a little walk back in time and just explore the beginnings, just the seedlings of how ZimmComm came to be. So thank you for being with me today, Chuck and Cindy. We were kind of pre-talking ahead of time and realizing this story even starts a little bit before ZimmComm, and we were connected because of a mutual colleague. I was working at Missouri Net, the political side of a radio network out of Jefferson City, and you, Chuck, and both you and Cindy had been working on the agricultural side of that same radio network called Brownfield.
That is correct. And even further back than that, getting into agriculture to begin with goes back to Gary Cooper, who was just with us over this past week. He was the one who got us into agriculture. I was a senior at the University of Florida majoring in broadcasting and hadn't done an internship. And Florida Farm Bureau wanted me to do an internship. And I was like, okay. And we did broadcast radio news about agriculture that we sent out to radio stations all over Florida. And that was how we got into the business of agricultural news. And then we ended up moving up to Brownfield. And we'll just jump from Florida to Brownfield.
Yeah.
We ended up actually both getting hired at Brownfield in 1990.
90 because I came out first, then had to go back and bring the family and everybody, because it was right at the December
end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I came there. I drove there, and came in to Missouri from the boot heel, and it was an ice storm, and I had a little flannel jacket, and that was all I had.
At any rate, we both got hired as a married couple.
Right.
We both got hired together to work for the Brownfield Network, and so continuing our being involved in agricultural news, and it was not something we went to college for. It was not something that, like, we wanted to be farm broadcasters when we grew up. We never intended to do that.
I didn't realize you had come together as a married couple to Brownfield. So
we knew Derry Brownfield and Clyde Lear before. We were at a conference with Clyde, and we sat down with him and talked about it. And basically we were saying, it was like, you have to hire both. You can't hire just one of us. He really wanted just another farm broadcaster. And he's decided that he needed a manager. So I was the manager. And so that's how we got there. And I consider Clyde and Derry being two of a handful of mentors of mine from a business standpoint in my whole life, essentially.
So how long were you working at Brownfield before then stepping out to do your own venture?
Just about 10 years.
I worked about 5 years and then quit and was freelancing. I actually freelanced for our former radio network in Florida. We kept the ties going, and we always went to the National Association of Farm Broadcasting annual meeting in Kansas City. We somehow we couldn't get out of it.
Yeah.
Once we got into it, we couldn't get out of it, because when we decided we wanted to start our own company again after Brownfield, we decided, well, we're going to just have to start our own company, because I already had a couple of freelance gigs, and we thought we'd have like a local PR agency or something there in Jefferson City when we were in Missouri, because we had local contact. And so we thought we'd just get out of ag, and that didn't work.
Well, and to your point, I actually stumbled into ag too through both of you. And to the person who didn't grow up in an agricultural family, with farms and it seems like ag is like niche and not part of everyday life for most people. But then once you get into the journalism side of it, you realize, oh my gosh, ag is actually running the world and it's involved in everything in every industry. So I think that's kind of maybe why it's hard to get out of it. You realize it's just so integral to everything. You can't really get away from it.
That's very true. And also, we really got, started working for Florida Farm Bureau initially. Farm Bureau started their own network.
Mailing out cassette.
We actually did.
Cassettes.
It started out actually mailing out reel-to-reel tapes
Reel
originally.
tapes first, yeah.
USDA
Yeah.
used to do that too. Something that we do now easily through the internet. We used to have to do it very physically by putting a tape in an envelope and sending it to the radio station and having them put it on the air so that other people could hear it.
And the reels
It's
you
so
had
cool.
to cut with a razor blade and a piece of tape, and that's how you cut out the ums and the ahs and all that good stuff.
Yeah, we didn't cut out too many ums and ahs in those days,
Yeah, you had to
because
be really well trained to make sure you didn't have that many to cut out because it was so much more work
That's
back
for sure. Oh my
that's
gosh.
right. It's so easy now, and it's amazing to look back. And I don't think we're that old, but to see how much we've gone through in such a short period of time.
It is fascinating. It's been a warp speed of technological advancement.
Well, when we started that first network in Florida with Gary Cooper, we were, along with Illinois Farm Bureau, we were the first farm radio entities to send out our programs to radio stations by satellite.
Right.
We used ABC initially to distribute our farm reports, and we were the first.
Yeah, we used to have a satellite uplink right there
In Ocala, Florida. Yeah.
in our studios in Ocala, Florida, when we started our radio network in Florida. So we had background of having our own company with Gary before we started our company together. When we started ZimmComm, that was in 2004. I was doing programming for Southeast AgNet. I had work, so I had freelance work. And then we started seeing this new thing that literally the internet was still very new. And 2004, though, was when Facebook started. So this was a brand new thing. And we looked at it, and one of the things that we didn't understand was how to use the software that made websites.
Well, let's
at the
backtrack
time.
real quick.
Okay.
Real quick. What even gave you guys this idea to venture into this brand new digital ag industry? What gap did you see in agricultural media that led you down to thinking that this could be a great new avenue?
What we really thought we would do, like Cindy said, maybe we would be like a small PR firm, and our clients would be in Jefferson City, Columbia, maybe as far as St. Louis. We found out pretty soon that it's really hard to break into those things back in that time. I think with Ag Wired, for example, I was just going to create a blog because one of the Learfield people suggested, why don't you just try to do that? It's simple.
It was brand new.
It's easy. And so we started it, and I was just going to write on it as I was learning. I went to a couple of blog conferences to understand what this was. And I was just going to write about agricultural marketing. Like, it'll be my blog and see how that happens. Well, that very quickly changed into what we know today as Ag Wired. We use WordPress. I went to one of those conferences. It was the guy who started WordPress. We had a chat, and it was all of a sudden, there we go.
You got to meet the person who started WordPress back then? That's incredible in and of itself.
Because they were brand new.
What it amounted to was we found that we had more contacts. This is where our contacts have been. We'd been in this relatively small and close-knit industry of agricultural communicators with the National Agri-Marketing Association and the National Association of Farm Broadcasting. That's where our contacts were. So one of our first clients first was the St. Louis Agribusiness Club, that we did a report for them. That was actually the first money I think we made.
It was.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
We did a report for them based on the Census of Agriculture and the impact of agriculture and agribusiness on the St. Louis area.
Took us months.
Yeah, it took us a long time. And that was the first real money we made. So that was kind of more agency work. But what we really saw lacking as farm broadcasters was when somebody would send out a press release, and as farm broadcasters, we wanted to do an interview with them. We call up the contact and, okay, we want to do an interview because we need a sound bite, or at least, or something to put on the air. And we call them up and there's, well, I'm sorry, that person just left the country for a month. For some reason, you can't get in touch with them. So we said, it would be nice if we had a service where you could send out the audio with the news release so that the broadcaster didn't have to call anybody and they had your audio and you had the same message. Plus, we had a lot of, in Missouri, you had several of the ag organizations like the Missouri Beef Council and Missouri Corn Growers they paid radio stations to do a report on what they were doing. So they had to call each one of them every time. So they had, say they were having 5 radio stations, KMZU and KMMO and, these local, radio stations. They'd call up, talk to each one of these persons all the time. So I'm like, hey, why don't we just do one interview and send it out to all those radio stations? So we do the interview and then you send it out and you don't have to do all those interviews. It's time saving for everybody. And you get the same message out. So we had the Missouri Beef Council we did that for, and we had the Missouri Corn Growers we did for a little while. And that was really our first thing. And it did become a very good way for them to distribute their messages.
It sounds like common sense now because that's become, par for the course. It's the norm, but it's interesting to realize and have you walk us through that wasn't the norm. And it speaks volumes of both of you about how you were quickly adapting to the new technology that was coming about and applying your ideas to it. You started getting to the turning point, but I did want to go over real quick. Like in the early days, especially back, you said it took you months for that first report.
Right.
Your first decent pay. What was the biggest risk you took? And did that risk pay off?
Well, we had to borrow some money, for one thing.
It was all a risk. It was all a risk. We risked everything. We had 3 kids that were in school still. We had to buy our own health insurance.
What motivated you guys to do this at that point in your lives? Like having 3 children, raising 3 children isn't easy at all. And birthing your own business.
Well, I was doing something different and decided not to do that anymore. So we're like, oh, what the heck are we going to do?
He had just left this organization and it's like, what are we going to do? And I said, well, you don't want to have people work for you. Because that was part of the problem with working at this organization was the staff and, dealing with personnel problems. Even when we had our own company with Gary, that was the biggest problem is people. Yeah. And you don't want to work for somebody else. So therefore, you need to work for yourself. Mm-hmm. And we really, when we started the company, we did not want to have employees. And we we essentially have not had employees. We've had freelancers.
But we focused on farm broadcasters because, that was really our background, if you will.
And I think we really also parallel a lot of our development with the ethanol industry. That is where things really took off with us because we got involved with them right at the ground level when things were taking off.
So I was at one of these conferences. So here's Tom Slenica, good friend of mine, and he was in a media room handing out little cards. Do you want to go to Washington, D.C.? And as far as I know, I was the only person of all the media that were there. I went to D.C., took some pictures. I'm talking like a little camera you could put in your pocket kind of thing. Then I knew that I could put a picture on my blog and I could put an audio file on there. From there, on this travel thing, its roots are really in this ethanol sector of it, if you will. And then it just kept growing and growing and growing and grow. It was pretty big.
Yeah, and that's kind
And
of when the ball got rolling so quickly that you said you didn't want to have employees, but then you had to pull me in as a freelancer in
Yep.
2007. That was just 3 years after you guys
Started the
imagined
company.
the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which is pretty incredible. And I have
And,
to say too, I was excited. You're like, you want to go cover some
so
indie events? I'm like, absolutely.
yeah. So like one of the first things that Laura and I did together was to go to Indianapolis 500. I mean, I remember learning things. So I'm trying to take a picture of a car going 220 miles an hour with this little camera, and here's the guy, his head of Indy, the camera people that he deals with, and it's like, son, what in the world are you doing? And I said, I am trying to get a picture of this car. Every time I push the button, I get a blank wall. There's nothing there. And he said, well, you need to get yourself some better gear. And Laura wound up working with me to do this.
And you
But it
mentioned
was.
the director. It was Ron McQueenie, and I remember too, for someone
Yes,
having such a, he had a very important role. He, had a lot of experience behind him, and I remember him also being very gracious.
it was.
He did not have any of that pomp and sometimes, certain attitude you get when people hold these positions. I remember him just being extremely friendly, extremely gracious, and he would help them grow in the position. Appreciated that.
the photography aspect of our business was accidental. Pretty much
Yeah.
everything has been accidental. I mean,
Isn't that the story of a business owner?
the gold mic, just
Yeah.
accidental.
And that's fun. That's kind of what makes the journey so fun, is all of these unplanned things that grow into being your identity.
What we started doing was being applied as it grew to things like Commodity Classic or a field trial out in the middle of a cornfield. And I could take pictures, I could record them as they're talking, I could interview farmers or them, and we could start putting that into, posts on AgWire, but we also started putting them into one post on Ag Newswire, and that's where we coined virtual Ag Newsroom.
Yeah.
We were then going to have these media people on our list. It's available for them. We wanted it to be open source because they're paying us to go to this conference or show or whatever it is, and it was enough for us, and so we wanted it to be free for them. They could download the picture, they could download the audio file or files, and they could then cut out sound bites. They could put it into their shows. They could transcribe it. They could do whatever they want with it, essentially. And that's really, the evolution of it. And I think one year, we went about 70 different places in 1 year. And that's a lot of travel. And Laura got to go to other countries.
Yes, you sent me
I
to
did not.
Germany and Honduras. I was thrilled. I had a lot of fun and learned so much. It was really eye-opening to see how, again, just the more you learn about ag, how much it's involved in your daily, and even the global, what's going on across the world affects you, and it affects you much more than you realize. So, what is your favorite country? What's the most standout country?
Italy, for me.
Personally, it's Rome, but I mean, we went on a lot of trips with IFAJ, the International Federation of Agricultural Journalists. So we went to Switzerland and Japan and Australia and New Zealand with definitely a bucket list.
Yeah.
It's someplace we never thought we'd be able to go. So as we're retiring now, most of the people of our age are traveling now because they didn't get to travel. We're like, we're done. We've been pretty much everywhere we wanted to go. There's places in the United States I'd like to go that I haven't been to, like the Grand Canyon. But one of the things I wanted to say about was our how we also developed along with social media, that we literally rode the wave of social media, that we started with Facebook, but also, we as soon as we could get on Facebook, we were on Facebook. But also,
Right.
as soon as we could get on Twitter, we were on Twitter. Our handles are still AgriBlogger and Farm Podcaster. So podcasting was something we didn't mention, and we were like the very first podcasters. We've been podcasting since 2007.
Yeah, that's
And
kind of going back to this too. How do you feel the agricultural community responded to all this digital news at the beginning?
Oh, we had people. I'll give you an example. I got a call from a farmer in Canada. He's on his combine, and he said, "Chuck, I just want to tell you how much I enjoy listening to my podcast, which I call the ZimmCast." And it was something he could listen to because, in especially parts of Canada, there just isn't even farm radio. I mean, there's just no radio. And at the time, we didn't have the ability with, Wi-Fi and out in the middle of nowhere.
my answer to that question would be initially, we got a lot of pushback in the industry.
Well, true.
NAFB, everybody. We had pushback from a lot of places because they didn't know how to treat us. Are we media or aren't we? That was really the hard thing. We had a hard time getting into Commodity Classic, for example.
Well, and the big guns, these are big corporations usually by this
Mhm.
point, and you guys were a two-man mom and pop broadcasting shop, if you want to, so to speak. So they probably wanted to see, can we take them seriously, or why should they get the same credentials or access
Right.
that we do? Yeah.
I remember going to with Bayer over in Germany twice, where they had a media event, and my name badge said influencer. It didn't say media. I think I was one of just a couple, but I was influencer.
One of the first
I'm like,
influencers too.
Yeah,
One of
they
the
did
first
that.
okay.
podcasters,
Yep.
first influencers. This is pretty
Yep.
incredible. Going back though to ZimmComm and everything. So you kind of already kind of delved into it. The turning point was when you got in with the ethanol industry.
Mhm.
Is that what you would say?
As far as our growth is concerned, because it is tracked with the ethanol industry, and we've stuck with them. We'll have to credit the ethanol industry in getting us into more of the on-site event stuff, because getting us into the photography thing and New Holland. Gene Hemphill, we didn't mention Gene. Gene was really the one who believed in us, because when you talk about what was the industry reception, you look at somebody like Gene Hemphill or Barry Nelson. Those are two guys who had been, they're old school PR people that had been in the industry for a long time, and Gene especially was able to see the potential of what we could do, because Gene was famous, New Holland was famous for not buying advertising. They didn't buy
Right.
advertising. They paid for media rooms. Gene would pay for the media room at Farm Progress Show. He didn't buy advertising on any of these radio stations or networks. That was how he was friends with them, and then they would do stories for New Holland just because Gene was a nice guy. So he saw the potential of us being able to do these interviews, putting them out there, and letting other media pick them up. He saw the value in investing in us.
That's
be
kind
able
of
to
an
do.
edge that you guys had on the traditional ag publications. I would say both that end of it, and then also that story that Chuck brought up about the guy in the combine who couldn't get the radio stories, but he was
Right.
able to listen to the podcast. So you had a unique kind of edge. It's really cool. And how do you think you built trust with your audience early on?
Well, for one thing, because of the travel that we've done, whether it's classic or some others, you're spending time with, say the board of directors, for corn
Yeah.
growers or whatever. You get to
Right.
know these people, and they become friends, and
Bill
and
Northey is a really good
yeah,
Bill Northey is an
yeah,
excellent example. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us,
right,
which just breaks my heart. But he's a wonderful guy. He was president of the National Corn Growers Association, and then he was Iowa Department of Agriculture director, and then he was in the first Trump administration, actually. He subscribed to our podcast, the ZimmComm Golden Mike podcast. So he heard every interview that we did, and he listened to it, and he commented on it every day, and he'd tell people about it. That's trust. So what Chuck said is really what it is. We knew these people. We were out there. We had met them. We'd interviewed them all. So they knew who we were.
It makes a huge difference still to this day, especially with all the noise of, online, we've got so many voices coming at us. I would say that not only who you know, but who knows you is even more relevant today because that's what cuts through all the noise. You're going to listen to someone when you have more of that intimate relationship with them.
Regardless of anything else that we might get into here, I just want to add the fact that what AI is doing and what its potential of doing, it's a human voice. It sounds good. It finds the information by itself and it makes it as a podcast. What is that? What does that do? And what does it do if you've done an interview for somebody? It's going to take you an hour, 2 hours to pull the quotes out you want to write into your story on the magazine or whatever it might be. And then you find out that you could just have it transcribed with AI and have it tell it how many words you want. And it's done in like 10 seconds.
So that is the next question is, how do you see everything you've grown, everything you've walked through, all the changes you've already grown through and experienced? Where do you think that this industry is going now with AI and all the new technology?
We're in the process of learning. But again, think of how long it took for social media from start to finish to go from, hey, I'm the only one that essentially that I know of that has a Twitter account. This AI thing it's going fast, and I don't see that changing. I'm not sure what the end game is on this.
When you look at the fact that it can do a story in 10 seconds and the fact that it can do so much now as far as writing and research, anything that requires a computer, AI is going to be able to do faster than a human. So I think we're retiring at a good time.
We didn't mention that yet.
Well, I mean, we retired from travel, and that's
Right.
significant and it really is. We just don't want to, as you know, Laura. Why? Half of the 4 trips that you went on had significant
Delays.
air travel problems. And
What-
when so much of our business depended on that, and what doesn't depend on it can be replaced by AI, Event photography still can't be replaced by AI at this
Not yet.
point.
And then even to like on hand, off the cusp interviews, like right in the moment, I still don't think you can get replicated with AI, or you're still gonna get, I feel like, different responses if someone's talking to what they know is an AI bot versus to an actual person, where there's mutual feelings and you read people through their gestures and things that AI still doesn't do. Not yet. Not saying it won't be able to soon, but so there's still some nuances there that I think a real person can bring to the table that AI cannot. But
And we've been blessed to have one of our first freelancer to help us is helping us again.
yeah, it's been fun jumping back in the saddle, seeing how much has changed, how much is similar. I like to say life doesn't go full circle, but it can certainly go full spiral. You're not the same person when you come back to the starting point, but it's been serendipitous and also just very thought-provoking to see that I've come back to working with you guys, and I always had such great fun, and you guys have always been wonderful people to work with. So it was an easy yes. And I was very honored too that way back then when you didn't really want to have employees, I was a person you liked to work with, and also honored that you would come back and ask me to do it again. So thank you both for that.
You're definitely the best photographer we ever had working for us, without question.
Oh, well, thank you.
And so just so you know, for this podcast, this ZimmCast, this will be episode 758.
We don't know how many. The ethanol report has also been going since 2008. It's the only ethanol specific podcast there is.
And I wanted to delve into that real quick because at one point I remember you had several different even websites.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember what were the
Hmm.
most websites and podcasts you had at one time? And then now too, I've seen that you've kind of funneled it back down into a couple of main
Well,
channels.
on the ethanol side, we started with a domain named domesticfuel.com. That you can go there, but it's going to take you to what is energy.agwire.com. But there were others like World Dairy Diary, we called it, for World Dairy Expo. There was
Vision.
Pioneer Hybrid, and their forage products.
That was a
Uh,
podcast we
farm.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we started them with
How
a
many?
number
That's
of
hard
them.
to say.
Yeah, Coke Agronomics.
We had a
It
Precision
was,
Pays one.
Precision
yes,
pays, yeah. So I mean, our basic, we managed to put everything on the ag wired umbrella,
yeah.
probably 10 years ago, because they had so many different names. Precision Pays had been a John Deere website, and we had a website for John Deere for Drive
Oh, the
Green,
dry green tractor.
and
Well,
Sure.
World Dairy
they got,
Diary
wow.
became Animal Ag Wired. They just exist. The website's still there,
Okay.
but.
Yeah.
So we're down to just AgWired, Energy AgWired, and Ag Newswire. Those are the main websites, and we have the ZimmCast and the Ethanol Report, and we do the Water for Food
ZimmComm
podcast.
Golden.
And
The
then you also
ZimmComm,
developed
Oh my.
these virtual newsrooms. Because that didn't exist when I was working with you back in 2007, 2008. What point did you kind of develop that concept of the virtual newsroom?
right about then, right after that. I
Oh
think we
yeah, because
started
it was at the time it was National Biodiesel Board.
our first clients were the National Biodiesel Board and the peanut growers, the
Right.
Southern Peanut Growers Conference. So both of those turned into blogs where we were posting all of the stories from there, and not really posting just here's the content. We just would do blog posts, do story posts, but that had the audio and had a link to the photo album on it. And then we started putting everything into one spot.
And
And
Ag Newswire.
that started more when we were covering Commodity Classic and Farm Progress Show, Farm Machinery Show, and when we started having multiple clients sponsoring that coverage too.
What was the hardest part of turning the platform into a sustainable business?
Getting people to
Hmm.
pay for what we do. Because really, the press release kind of distribution thing that was easy to quantify, I guess. It's like, here's what we're doing, it goes out to this many people. What we did on the websites, that was harder to quantify. It was harder to. Barry Nelson backed us, for example, and Barry would introduce us to people, and he'd say, there was ZimmComm, and they do whatever it is they do. He didn't really know what we did, but he liked it. That was what a lot of people didn't really know it was hard to really define what we did. So I think that was the hardest thing, was to get people to understand what we did, and they still don't know why.
And I will say, from the news release standpoint for Ag Newswire, it was a slow growth of that part of what we did. I mean, last year, the year before, for example, probably two of the biggest years of like the most releases that we've had to do is just in these last couple of years. We intend to keep doing that because we can do that in our offices. But I think we have some issues in ag as a whole industry, and it's not just communications. Farmers are having some seriously tough times right now. You
That's
know,
really, more than anything, what's going to affect the future, really, of this industry, is what
yeah,
happens with farmers, because it is very desperate out there, for sure. I've We've been in this business for a long time. Probably the 80s was the last time it seemed this desperate.
Yeah,
yeah.
attending these events for ZimComm is the struggle that they're going through, but also I feel like the point that's being missed is people who are so used to living life not connected to the ag world. I don't think they understand, like, if we don't get the ag world back into a sustainable situation, we're all going to be hurting here really fast and
Yeah.
not in fun ways. So hopefully we can come up with some solutions. Looking back, what decision do you think had the biggest impact on your success for ZimmComm?
I don't know. For one thing, we really enjoyed what we do,
There were so
you
many
know,
that were good
and
decisions. Like I said, they were accidents mostly, but just the ZimmComm Golden Mic. I think that was a really good decision that we made, and it became a symbol. It became something that we were known for. I think the commitment to innovation, and
And
once
adaptability,
2020,
not being
yeah,
stuck in an idea and thinking it can't morph or that idea can't morph. So maybe deciding that while you have this seed and you have this idea, you're going to let it grow to become what it is versus being stuck within a framework that
well, I'll say
what you think
one.
it's going to be.
It's like a plug for the National Agri-Marketing Association. That for me, and I've said it many times, if I could only belong to one organization, it was going to be NAMA. And that's because these were our clients. And I could go there. And when we started this company in 2004, we didn't have a booth until '05, but 2004, we were handing out little boxes of soy crayons
oh yeah,
that had our logo and whatever on it.
Really?
Yeah, and I've got a box of stuff that we
handouts
gave
and
away. We have some great stuff, but
that was when we that was before we changed our name too, when we almost got sued. Our first name was Agri Marketing Pros.
pros
We almost got sued over
ZimmCon
that.
has a better ring to it. So I
way
like it.
better, way
Yeah.
better. I was
Way
actually
better.
glad. I was
And
not
Ag Wired, no, it
upset.
was Ag Wired really that I think
Yeah,
Ag Wired.
That's
So when we
great.
started Ag Wired, if you look at the masthead of Ag Wired, it says News for Agribusiness Pros.
Mhm.
That's never changed, and that was the goal of it. The idea was that this was going to be a place for not just farm broadcasters, but people that we knew mainly from NAMA, people that were involved in agribusiness, in agri marketing.
and it's next week, and I'm not going to be there.
Oh no.
For the first time in,
It was a rough decision, but not. I mean, it is what it is. But because the first time that I ever went was with Gary Cooper. This was before we started our very first company with him, or just did. That was 1984. We went there. It was in the NAMA. The conference was in Orlando. Just put it down since 1984 to today. How many years is that? Going to NAMA every year. So this is kind of. I always like to say these are my peeps.
So it's kind of tough embracing this new non-travel. And then
for
on
sure.
that note, just to kind of wrap it up, what's next for you? What's the next step? Can you define the next step?
Well, that's a very good question that we're actually trying to figure out ourselves.
Well, it's just not easy is the problem. I mean, for most people, retirement is just as easy as walking away from whatever job it was that you had and going fishing. But when you built a business for over 20 plus years, it's a little more difficult. And travel was such a big part of our business that retiring from that has meant a big drop in our income and really this business is not easy to just walk away from or sell it to someone else.
Yes.
And we do have things that we want to be preserved in some way. All of the historical photos and interviews that we've done are on these platforms, and we don't think those should be lost. We have 250,000 photos in our Flickr albums. We want to make sure this kinds of things are preserved, but in order to do that, you have to keep paying for them. And so
I'd say it's a perfect website name, AgWired. What's the value in that? Are there entities that might want to turn it into something else? I don't know.
Well, and the ag industry is so reliant upon research as
Yeah.
far, research is a huge part of progress. So
mhm,
just the archive of information, of boots on the ground, bringing the field to, the internet to make it accessible and so many places. I think it's a huge database that definitely does need to be preserved so it can be accessed. And what would your final message be from where you are today, looking back over 20 years and growing and changing your experience?
It's been a fun ride.
Yeah,
We've
absolutely.
seen
That's the
some
only thing I can say.
great places, and we met a lot of great people. Chuck had said about missing going to NAMA next week, that he really liked being able. We did go to one event. He went to one event this year, and that was the National Ethanol Conference, and how he liked seeing all these people and everything. And I do too. I love it. I love seeing all those people. If I didn't have to travel to do it, it'd be great. I've, we've met some wonderful people and made some great friends. And if I didn't have to travel to see them again, I would.
You've logged plenty of miles, but those miles have given you many memories and many friendships.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Well, thank you guys so much for chatting with me about the experience and the growth of ZimmComm from birth to where we are now. And I look forward to continuing to work with you as you continue to carry the brand. So,
All righty.
We'll be doing that.
Yes, we will. And as many know, Cindy and I took a step to stop traveling this year. We're really happy to be working with Laura, as some of the events we've worked on for years still want to use good photography and interviews to make content with a target audience of ag journalists. So this step toward retirement, for most people, it's an easy thing. They can just walk away and go fishing. But when you built a business over 20 plus years, it's just a little bit more difficult. We're still working at the ZimmComm World Headquarters, so stay tuned. And that's the ZimmCast for now. We hope you enjoy it, and thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the ZimmCast, the official podcast of AgWired. Check us out at www.agwired.com to find out what's new in agricultural marketing.